Lil Wayne was a druggie. Like this group of guys are druggies.
Hip-hop has never been immune to addiction, but the scale of damage it has caused is often underestimated. Lil Wayne nearly watched his body shut down from years of lean abuse. Mac Miller turned success into a slow, quiet collapse that ended his life. Gucci Mane spiraled so far into addiction that prison became the only thing that forced him to survive. These aren't exaggerated stories or internet myths. These are documented realities, lived out in real time by some of the most influential artists the culture has ever produced.
Do you want to stop?
Yeah.
Are you working on it?
Yeah, every day. Every day.
And how so?
I start my day off with a prayer, ask the Lord to guide my steps and, cover me, keep me safe.
And when conversations turned to rappers who went all the way into that darkness and somehow came back alive, one name stands apart. Marshall Bruce Mathers III, Eminem. A Detroit artist who rose from chaos to become one of the most successful and technically respected MCs in history, while quietly fighting a pharmaceutical addiction that nearly erased him. At the height of his fame, Eminem wasn't just battling critics or competition. He was trapped inside a chemical routine that controlled every part of his life. The early 2000s were relentless. Non-stop touring, crushing expectations, constant media pressure, anxiety that never shut off.
Lil Wayne was a druggie. Like this group of guys are druggies. It wasn't just syrup, he was doing all that shit. He was doing shrooms before they even talking shrooms. That's why all this music, homie, his creativity. He can't tap back in because he's done burnt out. He needed these drugs and this mind-altering substance to go into this studio.
Insomnia that left him pacing through nights without sleep. Being a global superstar didn't bring relief, it intensified everything. After the success of the Slim Shady LP and the Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem began relying on prescription pills to cope. At first, it didn't feel dangerous. These were legal medications. Doctors prescribed them. That illusion of safety became part of the trap. It allowed the addiction to grow quietly, without triggering alarms, until it was deeply rooted. The situation escalated in 2002 during the filming of 8 Mile. Long shooting days and extreme exhaustion led to a prescription for Ambien to deal with insomnia.
It's like a fine line between having an influence and like letting the drugs like do you instead of you doing the drugs, like, cause it's so easy to get overconsumed and shit. I mean, I kind of lucked out because I did know the fine line between like, just taking something to come up with some ideas or getting the vibe versus that being a lifestyle.
That pill didn't just help him sleep. It erased time. It allowed him to function while emotionally detached, something he mistook for relief. As his tolerance increased, the prescriptions multiplied. Ambien turned into opioids and benzodiazepines. Vicodin, Valium, eventually methadone. By 2004 and 2005, Eminem was consuming staggering amounts. Reports and his own admissions describe him taking up to 20 or 30 pills a day, sometimes more. 60 Valium, 30 Vicodin just to feel normal. The music continued. Fame continued.
I had a drug problem, for a long time. It wasn't just in music, but I definitely was going through a drug problem, and I think it was more my state of mind. I was just pretty depressed, as everyone.
Even while successful?
Yeah, I think it started.
With success?
Yeah.
But mentally and physically, he was deteriorating. The December of 2007, the addiction nearly ended his life. Eminem bought pills off the street believing they were Vicodin. They weren't. They were methadone, far stronger than his body could handle. He collapsed in his bathroom and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors later told him he had been less than 2 hours from death. Even that wasn't enough to stop the cycle immediately. He relapsed within a month. It wasn't until intense one-on-one counseling, strict physical training, and consistent support from sober friends, including Elton John, who became his sponsor, that something finally shifted.
I was addicted. If addiction, I was addicted, but I didn't think I was addicted during my usage. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't think that I was on the drugs so bad that if I stopped, I would have physical withdrawals. I associate that with drug use and drinking stuff. Man, when I went in jail and then I went drinking lean, I went through like withdrawal, like you withdrawing from heroin or something like that. It was like physical.
On April 20th, 2008, Eminem got sober. As of 2026, he has remained clean for over 17 years. His survival stands as one of the most extreme examples of addiction and recovery in hip-hop history. But his story isn't the rule, it's the exception. And for many others, the fight with addiction didn't end with recovery. It ended with loss. For every artist who managed to survive addiction, there are others whose demons never loosened their grip. One of the most painful examples is DMX, Earl Simmons, force of nature whose voice, pain, and raw honesty reshaped hip-hop forever. On records, he sounded fearless. In real life, he was fighting something that started long before fame ever touched him. DMX's addiction didn't begin with success. It began in childhood. Just 14 years old, he was betrayed by someone he trusted. A local rapper he looked up to, someone older who was supposed to guide him, handed him a blunt without telling him it was laced with crack cocaine. DMX would later describe that moment as the birth of the monster. Before that, he wasn't smoking, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't experimenting. That single act planted an addiction that followed him for the rest of his life. Growing up in poverty-stricken environments where violence and instability were constant only made things worse. Survival came first. Trauma went untreated. Drugs became a way to escape thoughts he didn't have the tools to face. One kept him alive, the other made him famous. When his career exploded in 1998 with his debut album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, the fame didn't save him. It magnified everything. The addiction grew alongside the success. By the early 2000s, DMX was constantly in trouble with the law. Drug possession, DUIs, assault charges. The cycle repeated for years. Rehab attempts, relapses, public breakdowns. In 2016, he nearly died in a Yonkers hotel parking lot after overdosing. Narcan was used to revive him. Even after that, the addiction held on. He appeared on platforms like Dr. Phil and Ionla. Fix My Life, speaking openly about trauma, pain, and guilt. But awareness alone wasn't enough to break the cycle. DMX often downplayed his mental health struggles, even as they fueled his drug use. The two were tangled together, feeding off each other. On April 2nd, 2021, that battle reached its end. DMX suffered a heart attack triggered by a drug overdose that deprived his brain of oxygen. He fell into a coma and passed away on April 9th, 2021, at just 50 years old. Toxicology reports later confirmed a lethal combination of cocaine, fentanyl, and other substances in his system. His death wasn't sudden in the way headlines suggested. It was the final chapter of a war he'd been fighting since he was a teenager. A war he never asked for but never escaped. DMX's story stands as a reminder that talent, honesty, and cultural impact don't protect anyone from addiction. And while his battle ended in tragedy, other artists would face similar demons with different outcomes. Some survived, some didn't, and some are still fighting today. While DMX's battle ended in tragedy, another giant of hip-hop would continue fighting addiction while watching it slowly carve into his body. Lil Wayne. Dwayne Michael Carter Jr., born in New Orleans and signed to Cash Money Records at just 12 years old. Wayne grew up inside the industry. He became one of the most influential rappers of all time, but his rise was shadowed by a dependency that nearly shut his body down. Wayne's relationship with drugs started young. Growing up in Hollygrove, a neighborhood shaped by crime and survival, substances like codeine were part of the environment. Lean wasn't treated as dangerous, it was normalized. Over time, it became part of Wayne's identity. He openly celebrated it in his music, turning the mixture of codeine and promethazine into a symbol of lifestyle and status. Songs like Me and My Drink didn't just reflect his habits, they helped glamorize lean across hip-hop. That addiction didn't stay symbolic, turned physical fast. Wayne began suffering seizures, repeatedly landing in hospitals. In October 2012, he experienced 2 seizures aboard a private jet, forcing emergency landings in Texas and Louisiana. The following year, during a video shoot in March 2013, he suffered multiple seizures and was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Doctors found him unconscious. His stomach was pumped. Tests revealed dangerously high codeine levels in his system. He spent 6 days in intensive care. People close to him said he had consumed 3 bottles of lean the night before. At that point, it was no longer speculation. His body was failing under the weight of years of abuse. In later years, the long-term damage became impossible to ignore. In 2023, Wayne admitted he was dealing with memory loss caused by epilepsy, struggling to remember his own lyrics. Many attribute that condition to years of substance abuse combined with seizures. His mental health struggles only deepened the situation. In 2021, he spoke openly about attempting to take his own life at age 12 and the ongoing battles he still faces. While Wayne has said he has tried to cut back on lean following medical advice, concern remains about what the addiction has already taken from him. His story is not about a single overdose. It's about slow damage that accumulates quietly until the consequences become permanent. That same substance, lean, would also play a role in the loss of one of hip-hop's youngest stars, Juice WRLD, Jared Anthony Higgins, a Chicago artist whose emotionally raw style blended hip-hop with emo and punk influences. He rose through SoundCloud and exploded globally with Lucid Dreams, but from the beginning, his music was saturated with pain, anxiety, and addiction. The lyrics weren't an image, they were confession. Juice began experimenting with substances as early as 14 or 15. In interviews, he openly credited drug-heavy rap music, including artists like Future, for influencing his curiosity about lean. What started as experimentation quickly became dependency. Prescription opioids, Percocet, codeine, Xanax. As his career took off, access became unlimited, and the usage escalated. People close to him noticed the pattern. He would hide pills, use with certain groups, and present himself as sober around others. His engineer, Max Lord, later described confronting Juice during a 2019 tour in Australia, breaking down in tears out of fear that Juice wouldn't survive. Juice agreed to go to rehab. A spot was scheduled for December 22, 2019. He never made it. On December 8, 2019, just days after turning 21, Juice WRLD suffered a fatal overdose. After landing at Chicago Midway Airport, he began seizing while law enforcement searched his plane. Witnesses reported seeing him swallow multiple Percocet pills in an attempt to hide them. Narcan was administered, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Toxicology reports confirmed oxycodone and codeine toxicity. His death shook the industry. His mother later founded the Live Free 999 Foundation to support young people dealing with addiction, anxiety, and depression. Juice WRLD's story became one of the clearest examples of how openly suffering doesn't guarantee survival. Addiction doesn't always announce its end. Sometimes it hides behind success, youth, and creativity, waiting for the moment when the body finally gives out. While Juice WRLD's death forced the industry to confront addiction in the youngest generation of artists, another story showed how success, depression, and substance abuse can quietly intertwine over years. Mac Miller. Malcolm James McCormick. A Pittsburgh artist who grew up in front of the world, evolving from carefree mixtapes into some of the most introspective music hip-hop had seen in a decade. Mac never hid his struggles. From early on, his music and interviews made it clear that substance use wasn't a phase, it was a coping mechanism. His experimentation began in high school with weed, but as his career gained momentum, the pressure multiplied. When Blue Slide Park dropped in 2011 and received harsh criticism, the disappointment hit him hard. Touring expectations and self-doubt pushed him deeper into substance use. What started as heavy marijuana use escalated into lean and harder drugs. In a 2013 interview, Mac admitted he was deeply addicted to lean at the time. Spoke plainly about it, saying he wasn't happy and was constantly soaked in it, using it to numb himself. That honesty carried directly into his music. His 2014 mixtape Faces became a raw portrait of addiction, depression, and thoughts of death. Lines referencing drug habits in early graves weren't metaphor. They were warnings. By 2016, Mac managed to get clean for several months. He spoke about feeling clearer mentally and more focused creatively, but recovery was fragile. In 2018, after his highly publicized breakup with Ariana Grande, he relapsed. Alcohol returned, then hard drugs. The spiral resumed quietly, away from public view. On September 7, 2018, Mac Miller was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles home. He was pronounced dead at 26 years old. The coroner later ruled the cause as acute mixed drug intoxication, Fentanyl, cocaine, and alcohol were found in his system. Investigators revealed he had been supplied counterfeit oxycodone pills laced with fentanyl. 3 individuals were later charged in connection with supplying the drugs. Mac's death sent shockwaves through hip-hop. It forced conversations about fentanyl, fake pills, and how unpredictable modern drug markets had become. Even artists who believed they understood their limits were no longer safe. But while Mac's story ended in loss, another legend's addiction followed a different path, though it still carried fatal consequences. Pimp C. Chad Lamont Butler, one half of UGK and a foundational figure in Southern hip-hop. His voice, his attitude, and his authenticity helped define an entire regional sound. But behind the influence and respect was a severe addiction that quietly wore his body down. Pimp C was one of the most vocal advocates of lean culture. The mixture of codeine and promethazine wasn't just recreational for him, it was constant. Lean had already claimed lives in the culture, including DJ Screw, who passed in 2000 from a codeine overdose. Still, the habit continued to be celebrated. Pimp C referenced it repeatedly in his music, including collaborations that helped normalize the addiction across the South. His substance use was severe and prolonged. Complicating matters was his sleep apnea, a condition that causes breathing to stop during sleep. That condition made depressant drugs exponentially more dangerous. After serving nearly 4 years in prison for aggravated assault, he returned to heavy consumption almost immediately. Weight gain followed. Health declined. On December 4, 2007, Pimp C was found dead in his hotel room at the Mondrian Hotel in West Hollywood. He was 33 years old. Coroner ruled his death accidental, caused by respiratory depression due to promethazine and codeine, with sleep apnea listed as a significant contributing factor. His passing forced a reckoning in Southern hip-hop. Lean was no longer just part of the aesthetic. It had become a documented killer. Conversations shifted, slowly, painfully. And while some stories ended there, others would take a different turn. One artist would emerge from years of chaos with a transformation so complete it reshaped his life and career. That transformation belonged to Gucci Mane. Roderick Delantic Davis, a trap music pioneer whose influence on modern hip-hop is undeniable, but whose career for years was overshadowed by addiction, instability, and repeated trips through the justice system. Gucci's rise wasn't clean, and neither was his lifestyle. Drugs weren't a side issue, they were central to how he lived and survived. Growing up in East Atlanta, surrounded by crime and limited options, Gucci was exposed early. By middle school, he was already selling drugs. What began as hustling quickly turned into personal use. By the 2000s and early 2010s, his addiction was extreme. Marijuana, crack, lean, ecstasy, prescription pills. He later admitted he was drinking lean so heavily it left him disconnected from reality and smoking nearly a pound of weed a day. That lifestyle fueled chaos. Over 20 arrests followed. Drug cases, weapons charges, probation violations, mental health episodes blurred with substance abuse. In 2013, Gucci openly acknowledged that a heavy codeine and promethazine binge had destroyed him. He announced plans to enter rehab, but instead was sentenced to federal prison. That prison sentence became the turning point. Between 2014 and 2016, Gucci got sober, cold turkey, while incarcerated, enduring brutal withdrawal without substances. When he came home, the change was undeniable. He lost weight, regained clarity, built discipline. Married Keishia Kerr, who became a stabilizing force in his life. Years later, he openly shared his recovery journey, emphasizing that relapse does not equal failure and that isolation is addiction's strongest weapon. Gucci's survival story stands in contrast to many others. But not every artist escaped before consequences hit. T.I. Clifford Joseph Harris Jr., another Atlanta figure who helped shape trap music, faced his own reckoning with addiction. His most serious struggles centered around prescription opioids. While incarcerated, T.I. underwent extensive dental surgery, including multiple root canals. Painkillers were prescribed legitimately, but dependency followed fast. In 2010, he was arrested in Los Angeles alongside his wife for ecstasy possession. Drug tests later showed opiates in his system, violating probation. He was sentenced to 11 months. During sentencing, T.I. took accountability publicly, admitting he had screwed up and needed to change. He later described rock bottom as necessary, saying some people need that moment to reset their mindset. T.I. sought guidance from Eminem, who had already survived a similar addiction. Since then, he has remained publicly sober, focusing on business, music, and advocating personal responsibility in recovery. From Atlanta, the story moves west to Seattle. Macklemore, Ben Haggerty. An artist who built his career on honesty and vulnerability, and who never hid his struggle with addiction. Macklemore's substance abuse began early. At 13 or 14, he drank alone in his parents' home, quickly losing control. He later described addiction as an allergy. One taste triggered an uncontrollable need for more. In his late teens and early 20s, he moved into harder drugs, including OxyContin, which he described as synthetic heroin. The withdrawals were severe: sweats, shaking, emotional emptiness. Even after massive success with the heist, he relapsed more than once. One relapse followed his withdrawal from support meetings. Another occurred during the COVID lockdowns when isolation cut off recovery networks. By 2023, Macklemore had regained sobriety and released music shaped by that relapse and recovery. He even used his platform to address the opioid crisis directly, speaking at the White House to advocate for treatment access. His story reinforced a hard truth: recovery is not linear, it's ongoing. That lesson echoed even louder through one of hip-hop's founding figures, Flavor Flav. William Jonathan Drayton Jr., a founding member of Public Enemy and one of the most recognizable personalities in the culture. Behind the oversized clocks and high-energy persona was a devastating addiction to crack cocaine that lasted nearly 2 decades. At the peak of Public Enemy's success in the early 1990s, Flav's addiction spiraled. He later admitted to spending over $2,000 a day on drugs for years, totaling millions. Arrests followed. Family relationships collapsed. Custody was lost. Rehab attempts came and went. Addiction turned him into someone he didn't recognize. Real recovery began around 2008. By the early 2020s, he had logged over a decade sober from hard drugs, openly acknowledging a brief relapse and resetting his sobriety clock without excuses. His story became proof that accountability matters more than perfection. The final chapter brings the story back to Chicago. Fredo Santana, Derek Coleman, a drill pioneer whose raw sound helped define a movement, but whose addiction would end his life far too early. Fredo struggled with Xanax and lean, often referencing both openly. He linked his addiction to untreated PTSD from childhood trauma, using drugs to escape memories he couldn't face. Over time, his health collapsed. Seizures, organ failure, hospitalizations, diagnoses of liver and kidney failure tied directly to substance abuse. In January 2018, Fredo Santana suffered a fatal seizure at just 27 years old. The autopsy cited cardiovascular disease worsened by epilepsy and long-term drug damage. He left behind a young son and a legacy as a drill pioneer, whose story became a warning. Taken together, these stories reveal a pattern hip-hop can no longer ignore. Addiction doesn't discriminate, fame doesn't protect, talent doesn't cancel trauma. Some survived, many didn't, and every loss left scars far beyond the individual. This isn't about glorifying pain, it's about recognizing reality. Addiction has taken some of the culture's brightest voices and nearly silenced many more. Understanding these stories isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. Because in hip-hop, survival has always mattered just as much as success.